Joseph, morning. I hope you've recovered from the Springbok game last night and you had a good weekend. Can we please, as we bring up the first look at our oil price this morning, I had it earlier, but I think it's moved again. Let's just talk commodities very quickly, Joseph. Morning. We're now over 5.5% north for the Brent crude price. I feel a nightmare for the fuel price coming up. What do you make of it? Morning, Joseph.
Good morning to you, Mr. Edwards, and the viewers of eNCA. Certainly, I think apart from the Springbok that is bruising, nice win over France, where I think South Africans was something to cheer about this week and until next Sunday. Brent crude oil is not looking good at all. Now above $90 per barrel. It was sitting at about 84 just recently last week. That's not really good for our inflation and certainly, for us on the retail at the pumps. So that's not looking good. We've seen also the rand strengthened a little bit, below the $19 rand to the dollar level, but certainly creeping up against to sitting about 18 rands to 97 to the dollar. That is too very, very weak, and that may basically continue to put pressure on inflation in South Africa. We also saw that inflation-linked bonds had quite a big sell last week, which may certainly say that investors are worried about inflation, and certainly they want to pick up that type of asset.
Let's just talk for a second. It's always important that we understand the difference between the strengthening rand and the weakening dollar in a case like this, or even vice versa, because I saw the gold price also going up, which is always a safe haven when there's concerns around the US dollar, Joseph, isn't it? So what is it, rand versus dollar at the moment? Who's weakening, who's strengthening? And just explain maybe why.
So I think if we look at it in terms of this, possibly we could say that the dollar might be slightly weakening, not necessarily that the rand is strengthening. I think because our situation has not necessarily changed, but there is also the geopolitical issues that is happening in Israel and Gaza. The war have shifted from Russia, Ukraine into Israel, Gaza, and you saw, as you mentioned there, that some of the commodities in terms of safe havens, palladium and gold, all up by more than 2%. Gold up 2.79, and palladium up 2.2. And we mentioned already that Brent crude oil is up by about 5.7%. So I think the dollar certainly is kind of still buoyant given the numbers that happened last week. We saw that our rand strengthened, when the U.S. payroll numbers came up stronger at 336,000. Versus the 170,000 that was expected, which basically baffled, economists and traders that the rand actually was stronger. But I think it's just coming back to that.
When we talk about one of the other big investments at the moment as well, I see the World Bank now getting involved. There's conversations, Joseph, around a lot of money to help South Africa out of the blackout hole at the moment. So what are you hearing about that?
That's 1 billion. So the World Bank is basically in discussion with the SA government. They're going to advance about $1 billion to South African government, not Eskom, in terms of transmission. And they're saying they're going to this money, basically, or the transmission capacity that will be developed by the private sector. And because I think, the power has been the main issue in South Africa that is stumbling growth. And I think the IMF and the World Bank also basically continue mentioning that power is the main threat to SA growth, and they're trying to help South Africa in terms of their just energy transition, and certainly I think also putting those conditions that the private sector will be involved in building up that capacity. Remember, in February, the government basically took over about I think 300 billion of Eskom's debt to just try and give it a debt relief. But I think we all know that whether the money goes directly to Eskom or to government is the same thing, because government is to the main guarantor of Eskom.
And as I always say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you follow that money, it's going to have to get paid back somewhere. And now we're talking about billions, like it's a box of Smarties. Joseph, just as I say goodbye to you, what's your crystal ball looking like for this week? Let's maybe focus on markets because of what's happening with the dollar and what's happening with the oil. What's your predictions? What's your crystal ball telling you?
I think we'll recover a little bit. You see that the Dow futures is just marginally up or flat to up. I think we're going to continue to recover. We recovered well last week in terms of SA, although the market ended up 0.6 down on Friday. But I think there will be a little bit of recovery this week. I think the market have already factored in what's happening in Israel, and certainly I think if the rains starts to come on, I think it will be very good in terms of our own economy, because I think most of the bad news already is being factored in.
Well, I would have thought the Springboks would have pushed our JSE numbers up later today. That's obviously not going to happen, but you can always hope and wish, can't you? Joseph Busha, always good to have you on the show, my friend. Joseph Busha from JM Busha Investment Group as well. So we're all watching that oil price very carefully. It's a massive jump. It is now above $90 per barrel. And we care, of course, because a couple of weeks from now, we could see, if it keeps going north, we could see another fuel price increase. Obviously, far too early to predict in the month, but we'll watch that for you closely.